Um, have you ever felt like, your own mind is just kind of working against you, like it's feeding you doubts or maybe making a really bad idea look, well, incredibly appealing?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we usually just chalk up those dark impulses to stress or maybe self-sabotage.
Right, like a temporary glitch in the system.
Exactly. You're lying in bed at
Yeah.
2 in the morning and suddenly your brain just starts serving up the most intense, isolating doubts. Or you're looking at a genuinely terrible idea, like a habit you're trying to break or a text you definitely should not send.
Oh, we've all been there with the text.
Right. And suddenly that bad idea just looks undeniably appealing. And we just think of that as, well, us having a weak moment.
Yeah, but the sources we are exploring today frame that exact experience in a completely different, almost haunting way. Like, what if that inner voice actually had an identity?
Which is a wild thought to entertain.
It really is.
Huh.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a really fascinating stack of material today to explore one of the most mysterious concepts in Arab and Islamic folklore.
Yes, and we have two really great sources to help us do that.
We do. We have this highly detailed visual taxonomy, basically a literal chart of Arabian mythological creatures. And accompanying it, we have a comprehensive translated text guide, and it's titled The Shadow Companion, a complete guide to the Qareen.
Our focus today is on that specific entity, right? The Qareen.
Yeah.
Because it isn't hiding under your bed. It is intimately tethered to your very existence.
Yeah, we are totally bridging ancient mysticism and modern psychology today because, well, to understand this entity is basically to examine the hidden corners of human nature.
Absolutely.
So before we get into how this thing operates inside the mind, we should probably look at where it sits in the broader world of folklore, because context matters here.
Oh, it really does.
The visual chart in our sources is, it's essentially a lineup of fantastical beasts. You have the ghoul, which is usually depicted as this shape-shifting, flesh-eating creature lurking in graveyards.
Terrifying.
Yeah, super terrifying. And then you have the Ifrit, which are these massive, imposing entities, and the Merid towering, powerful spirits that are often associated with water or, like, immense magic.
Right. It's a very crowded space of supernatural predators.
Yeah.
But the defining characteristic of all those creatures you just listed is that they are external dangers.
External, right, like they exist out in the physical world.
Exactly. You might encounter an ifrit in an abandoned city or a ghoul out in the desert. And because they're external, they operate on physical rules.
Meaning you can, like, run away from them?
Yes. You can run away, you can hide. Theoretically, I mean, a hero in these stories could even fight them with a sword.
Okay, let's unpack this, because that physical nature is a stark contrast to what we see next on the chart. Mixed right in with all the shapeshifters and desert monsters is the Qareen.
Right there on the same
Wow.
page.
Yeah. And the text guide, The Shadow Companion, explains that the Qareen is fundamentally different from the rest of the pantheon. Wait, actually, before we go further into the psychological profile, the text mentions that the Qareen is a type of Jinn created from smokeless fire.
That's right.
And when I hear the word Jinn, my mind just immediately goes to, the pop culture idea of a genie in a lamp granting wishes.
Of course. Yeah, that's the standard Western association.
So what does that actually mean in this theological and historical context?
Well, that is a crucial distinction to make. In Islamic and Arabian cosmology, jinn are definitely not magical wish granters.
Good to know.
Yeah, they're an entirely separate, hidden species that exists parallel to humanity. I mean, they have their own societies, their own free will, their own moral
Oh,
complexities.
wow. So they're a whole parallel civilization.
Exactly. And when the text says they are created from smokeless fire, it's really describing their fundamental essence. Humans are described as being created from earth or clay, right?
Right. So we have physical density, weight, mass.
Exactly. But jinn, being made of smokeless fire, are essentially pure energy. They are completely devoid of the heavy physical matter that we possess. So they're invisible to the human eye.
Because they lack physical density?
Right. But they still have an immense presence.
So they exist in a completely different state of matter, effectively. And the Qareen is a specific subcategory of this hidden species. But it doesn't live in a parallel society out in the ether somewhere.
No, it does not.
It lives with you. The word Qareen itself translates roughly to coupled or companion, which sounds almost nice until you realize it's a companion you literally do not choose. Unlike an ifrit that you might run away from, the Qareen is like an inescapable lifelong subscription you are enrolled in at birth.
That is a perfect way to put it. What's fascinating here is that the text states a specific Qareen is assigned to every single human being at birth.
Every single one.
Every single one. It stays with you your entire life, through every single moment. And it only leaves the physical plane when you die. It is just this inescapable attachment that begins the second you take your first breath.
You can't cancel it.
No, you cannot opt out.
Which completely subverts the traditional idea of a monster, right? Like, a creature that chases you down a dark alley is terrifying, but it's a temporary event. The Qareen operates on a paradigm of utter intimacy.
Utter intimacy, yes.
It knows everything you know. The folklore suggests it mirrors the human's exact traits and patterns of thinking. It's basically sitting in the passenger seat of your life, just observing every single vulnerability.
Right. Which means it doesn't need to rely on jump scares.
Yeah.
Because it's a constant companion, it operates completely differently. The profound challenge of the Qareen is its subtlety.
Because it's just always there.
Exactly. It watches your reactions. It learns your insecurities. It notes what makes you angry, what makes you feel isolated, and what temptations you struggle with the most.
Okay, so since you can't run from something that is literally always with you, the next logical question is, what exactly is it doing to you all day? If it has no physical power to force our hands,
Which it doesn't.
right, and it lacks the density to physically interact with the world, its entire existence relies on this weird psychological loophole. How does it actually manipulate us?
Well, the source text is very explicit about its limitations.
Yeah.
The Qareen has absolutely no physical strength.
So you can't fight it with your fists?
You cannot punch it. It cannot physically push you into making a bad decision or physically place an addictive substance in your hand. Its powers are entirely psychological and hidden.
Okay.
The text actually uses a specific term for its primary weapon, which is waswasa.
Waswasa. The translation provided in the guide is whispering. But it seems to imply something much more insidious than just, talking quietly.
Oh, much more. It is the act of continuously whispering negative thoughts, doubts, and dark suggestions directly into your consciousness. It's this slow, methodical chipping away at your resolve. Yeah, the guide notes that its main functions are to affect your mood, to amplify your pre-existing fears, and this is key to actively decorate or embellish bad decisions.
Decorate them.
Yeah, it dresses up your mistakes so they look incredibly appealing before you even make them.
It sounds incredibly modern when you phrase it that way. So the Qareen is essentially acting like a highly personalized, malicious social media algorithm, but localized entirely inside your own brain.
That is exactly it.
Like, it isn't creating new desires out of thin air. It's tracking your historical data, finding your vulnerabilities, and then feeding you the exact negative content you are most susceptible to clicking on.
The text really supports that modern comparison.
Yeah.
I mean, if we connect this to the bigger picture, an algorithm doesn't force you to buy a product, right? Or doom scroll for 3 hours.
Right. It can't physically make my thumb move.
Exactly. It merely presents the option in the most irresistible, targeted way possible.
Yeah.
The Qareen knows exactly how to do that because it is present during all your states of highest vulnerability.
So when you're feeling lonely or angry.
Yes, when you are feeling isolated, it provides the thought that no one cares about you. When you are boiling with anger, it suggests the absolute cruelest possible thing you could say to someone. It exploits the flaws you already have.
But hold on, let me just play devil's advocate here for a second. If I have an invisible, energy-based creature sitting on my shoulder feeding me terrible ideas, isn't that just the ultimate psychological scapegoat?
Ah, I see where you're going.
Like, if I ruin my relationships or do something awful, I can just say, oh, it wasn't me, my Qareen tricked me. Doesn't this entire concept sort of remove human accountability rather than empower us?
That is the exact trap the ancient theologians warned against. And the text guide actually addresses it head-on through the doctrine of free will. Remember the influence versus force dynamic?
Right, it can't force you.
Exactly. The Qareen has no steering wheel. It can only suggest directions. Take this dark alley, it's faster. Or say that cruel thing, it will make you feel powerful, but your hands are always on the wheel.
Okay, I get that.
The power lies entirely in suggestion, which means the ultimate responsibility always remains with the human. The human intellect and free will are considered vastly superior to the Qareen's whispers. You are the one who actually chooses to act on the thought.
Okay, so that distinction keeps the moral weight entirely on our shoulders. But it also raises a pretty big theological question.
Which is?
Well, If this entity's entire job description is to sit in your mind and whisper bad ideas, the listener might be wondering, how is this any different from the standard, global concept of a devil? Or, in the context of Arabian theology, the Shaytan?
That's a great question. And the source material actually provides a direct comparison table breaking down the Qareen versus the Shaytan or Satan.
Oh, nice. So what's the verdict?
The difference really comes down to scale, specificity, and ultimate purpose. The Shaytan is a general enemy. The goal is incredibly broad, like tempt all of humanity, create global chaos, lead mankind astray.
Big picture stuff.
Right, and there are many of them, casting this massive, indiscriminate net over populations.
While the Qareen is a one-to-one ratio, it's a specific, highly individualized, bespoke companion.
Exactly. The Shaytan is broadcasting a wide radio signal, hoping someone, anyone, tunes in. The Qareen is sending a direct encrypted text message just to you, based on a lifetime of intimate observation. Its influence is profoundly personal.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Does it have to be a malicious influence? Like, is it always evil? Because if the Qareen is a type of Jinn, and Jinn have free will, does this companion have to be a bad guy?
It's a logical question.
And the text reveals a massive twist here that completely caught me off guard. The answer is not necessarily.
No, it isn't. And this brings the concept out of the realm of a simple, scary story and into a deeply philosophical framework.
Right.
The relationship between the human and the Qareen is defined by the text as a state of mutual influence.
Mutual, meaning it goes both ways.
Yes. The Qareen is whispering to you, attempting to pull you toward your baser instincts. But the human's behavior directly impacts the Qareen in return. It's a dynamic ecosystem.
So if a human is consistently grounded, like if they maintain discipline and act morally, the text says the Qareen's negative influence actually weakens. You can essentially starve it of its power by just refusing to react to the waswasa.
Exactly.
And the lore even mentions these rare, super fascinating instances where some Qareens have actually been converted to Islam, to a state of righteousness by the sheer discipline of their human. And once converted, they only command their human to do good.
Which completely reframes the entire narrative of the shadow self. The Qareen isn't just an external punisher or, a static curse you simply have to endure until you die. It is a mirror.
A mirror.
It reflects the human's own spiritual and moral state. If you feed the negative impulses, the Qareen grows louder and more dominant. If you cultivate discipline, the Qareen is forced to adapt to that new environment.
That changes the entire dynamic. Means you aren't just a victim of this presence. You actually have leverage over it. We're so used to stories where you either have to, kill the monster or run from it. The idea that you can essentially tame your inner shadow, that you can convert this lifelong antagonist into an ally just by being deeply grounded in your own values, is wild. It's empowering. It turns a parasite into a partner, depending entirely on how you manage your own mind.
It implies that the darkness inside us is malleable. It responds to the boundaries we set. But if this entity feeds on our reactions and our lack of discipline, the natural question is, how did people historically defend themselves against something they couldn't see or physically fight?
Well, the text guide details the traditional methods. In Islamic culture, the primary defense against the Qareen's whispering involves the constant remembrance of God and the reading of the Quran. That spiritual anchoring is basically the foundation.
Right.
But critically, the texts don't stop at merely reciting words. They heavily emphasize internal psychological discipline. You are instructed to actively guard your heart and mind, controlling your thoughts and behaviors.
The historical texts demand this hyper-awareness of what is generating inside your own head. You have to monitor your thoughts, evaluate where they are coming from, and consciously choose whether to engage with them. It requires an incredible amount of mental vigilance.
So what does this all mean? When you look at those traditional protections, maintaining inner awareness, isolating negative thoughts, recognizing the whispers as separate from your core self, were ancient people essentially creating an early framework for cognitive behavioral therapy?
This raises an important question, and the connections to modern psychology are just impossible to ignore, particularly regarding cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Yeah, because it sounds so similar.
It is. Today, the Qareen is widely viewed by scholars as an incredibly potent metaphor for the subconscious mind. It's the personification of the ego, the inner voice, and that eternal psychological struggle between our base desires and our higher values.
And we see this archetype everywhere in pop culture now. The text points out how frequently this concept appears in psychological horror and modern literature. It's often depicted as a person's literal shadow or a dark clone.
Yes, the doppelganger.
Right. It's the physical manifestation of intrusive thoughts. But by giving a name and an identity to intrusive thoughts, did they make those thoughts easier to isolate and manage? How does personifying those thoughts actually help us?
Well, in modern psychology, particularly within CBT and acceptance and commitment therapy, there's a mechanism called cognitive diffusion.
Diffusion, like diffusing a bomb.
Well, diffusion with an E,
Yeah.
diffusion, untangling. When a person is overwhelmed by anxiety or intrusive thoughts, the brain tends to fuse the thought with the person's identity. So if you have a sudden destructive thought, your brain says, I am a terrible person for thinking this, or I must act on this because I am feeling it so strongly.
You become entirely tangled up in the emotion of the moment. The thought and your identity become indistinguishable.
Yes. Cognitive diffusion is the practice of untangling that knot. You learn to observe the thought without attaching yourself to it. Instead of saying, I am angry and I want to destroy this relationship, you train your brain to say, I am noticing a thought that is telling me to destroy this relationship.
Wow, just that little shift in phrasing.
Exactly. It creates a psychological distance. It changes the chemical and emotional reaction in your brain because you are no longer the victim of the thought. You are simply the observer of it.
So by giving this phenomenon a name, the Qareen, and an identity, these ancient traditions were essentially applying cognitive diffusion centuries before modern psychology gave it a clinical label. They externalized the intrusive thought.
By framing the sudden urge to do something destructive not as you, but rather as the whisper of your Qareen, it provides that exact moment of space. It allows a person to evaluate the impulse objectively.
That makes so much sense.
You aren't inherently bad for having a dark thought. You just have a very chatty, manipulative companion whose suggestions need to be ignored.
It isolates the mechanism of manipulation. You don't have to suppress the thought, which we know doesn't work anyway.
No, suppression never works.
You just acknowledge it, label it as the Qareen's was wasa, and then choose a different path.
And that perfectly aligns with the text's final conclusion. The source explicitly states that the Qareen is ultimately a silent test of human will.
A silent test.
Yes, the framework doesn't matter as much as the outcome. Whether you view it through the lens of literal folklore, as an actual being of smokeless fire residing in your consciousness, or you view it as a sophisticated ancient metaphor for the shadow self, the core message remains identical. It represents the timeless human struggle with the ego.
It's the ultimate proof that the most complex, grueling battles we face aren't out there in the physical world. They aren't with monsters hiding under the bed or ghouls in the ruins or even external enemies we can see coming from a mile away. The most dangerous territory is the mind.
Because the invisible companions there know all your secrets, and they know exactly how to use them against you.
But as we've learned today from both ancient folklore and modern psychology, they do not control the board. You possess the ultimate authority over which of those whispers you choose to turn into actions. Your free will is the ultimate defense.
Exactly.
The Qareen might highlight the vulnerabilities, it might suggest the most destructive destination, but you are the only one who can actually put the car in drive.
It is a heavy responsibility to constantly monitor that inner environment, but it's also deeply liberating. You are not a helpless victim of your inner voice. You are its curator and its master.
Which leaves us with something to think about long after this deep dive ends. We know that this relationship is dynamic. It's a two-way street.
It is.
So if the Qareen is truly a mirror of your own habits and mindset, if it feeds on your choices and adapts to your reactions, what does the current tone of your inner voice say about the companion you have been shaping your entire life?
That is a great question.
Think about the intrusive thoughts you let linger and the impulses you choose to indulge. Are you currently hosting a monster or have you trained a friend?